Happy Valentine's Month, everybody, and Tony here with my review of Strauss's Die Frau ohne Schatten, which I saw at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. The conductor was Axel Kober. The production was done by Tobias Kratzer. The assistant director was Rainer Sellmeier. The lights were handled by Olaf Winter. The videographers were Manuel Braun, Jonas Dahl, and Janitz Bibi. The chorus master was Jeremy Bynes. The children's chorus master was Christian Lindhorst. The dramaturg was Jörg Königsdorf and Sebastian Häupler. I was really excited to see this particular production of Strauss's Die Frau ohne Schatten at the Deutsche Oper Berlin because I was totally excited to see, hear, and witness such a fine cast consisting of Jordan Shanahan, Catherine Foster, David Butt-Philip, and Daniela Köhler as the two pairs of couples. But before I get to their singing, a few words about the production. This particular production of Strauss's Die Frau ohne Schatten transports all the action from a mythical, exotic, fairy tale-like locale to a more modern-day setting that is quite akin to a lot of the domestic sitcoms and the domestic dramas that we've been seeing on television, as well as some of the films directed by Paul Thomas Anderson and Todd Solondz that deal with very flawed yet very human people. Think Dallas, Dynasty, and The Cosby Show for the world of the Emperor, the Nurse, and the Empress, as well as the Red Falcon. And think Roseanne, Malcolm in the Middle, All in the Family, and Good Times for the world of Badok, his three brothers, and his wife. It basically shows the drastically huge class divide between the emperors and the empresses' noble, aristocratic, millionaire-like world to that of Badok's, his wife's, and his three brothers' more lower-class suburban lifestyle, in which Badok and his wife operate a laundromat alongside his three brothers. But they're not doing too hot financially. That is until the nurse, who is essentially a cross between all the members of the Golden Girls, from Blanche all the way up to Sophia Petrillo, introducing Badok's wife to a life of fancy items and extramarital affairs in which she hires a young male pimp to serve as Badok's wife's lover. She additionally introduces Badok, his wife, and his brothers to the much higher life a la the Jeffersons, what with Badok being the George Jefferson to his wife's Louise Wheezy Jefferson. And what's also quite interesting about this production is that the usually unseen characters take flesh, such as the voice from above, who is usually an offstage voice. But here in this production, she's a sort of marriage and pregnancy counselor for Badok and his wife. And speaking of Badok's wife, we also see some images of her getting operated on by a doctor to see if she is going to get pregnant, let alone ensure that her pregnancy is a lot more fully realized with a bit of an operation and an injection to ensure that her hormones are okay to be thoroughly fit for not only her pregnancy, but also for her overall fertility levels to be at an all-time high. Speaking of fertility levels being at an all-time high, she even bleeds profusely on stage before the second half of the opera finishes, and as soon as the nurse conjures up her mighty spell. As for the nurse, she doesn't end up being banished to the human world, but in this scenario, which is essentially taking pages right off of House, Scrubs, Grey's Anatomy, and a lot of the medical dramas, including General Hospital, we see that the nurse and the Empress enter the maternity room to see which baby is fit for the Empress to acquire, although she has not cast a shadow, let alone ended up being pregnant yet. However, as the Empress in this production finally has enough and decides to be a big girl and grow away from her mother figure, she decides that she doesn't want to have anything to do with the nurse, walks away, but the nurse will not have any of that and tries to steal one of the babies before Kaikobot's messenger, who begins the opera as a sort of delivery man, but here also ends up working as one of the scrubs from the hospital, calls the police and has the nurse arrested. And the Empress's final task to save her husband is here in the form of a welcoming new mother's party, in which the Empress does not want to fit in that conventional type of motherhood and decides that all she wants is her husband back. And the interesting thing about this version of Kaikobad is that he seems to be a retired composer who still welcomes the emperor with open arms, but he still wants his daughter to continue his legacy, hence him giving a playbook or musical score to ensure that she continues his so-called musical legacy. Even one of the pregnant women, who is supposed to be the guardian of the threshold, encourages her that she ought to drink the water from the spring of life, but the Empress does not want any of that and decides to drink a huge bottle of champagne before deciding that she does not want anything to do with being a mother and decides that all she wants at this very moment is just to be united with her husband, the emperor. Furthermore, we also see some of the characters get themselves into some really controversial and compromising activities, such as the emperor going out for his so-called hunt when he is actually at a bar meeting up with random women, having different illicit affairs, and even trying to hook in one of the girls, which he calls his falcon. But the Empress finds out and is totally hurt at what she has witnessed. Even Barak and his three brothers attempt to beat up the young man that his wife is having an affair with, thus also showing that there is some salaciousness going on between these two couples' lives, even to the point where Barak and his wife just end up being somewhat separate from each other, as in living separately and not going back together again, in contrast to the Emperor and the Empress being happily together again. At least with Barak in the ending, he at least gets to see his daughter, which I assume he ends up sharing custody with his wife. So while the fairy tale elements and aspects are taken away from Tobias Kratzer's production of Die Frau Ohne Schatten by Strauss, at least it's still kind of interesting to see how the characters would end up functioning in a real world scenario that is quite akin to the formulas that we've seen in television shows such as The Jeffersons, or All in the Family, Dallas, Dynasty, or even House, General Hospital, or Scrubs, or many of the other television shows from the 80s, 70s, or even early 2000s that we have seen probably growing up with the likes of CBS, NBC, or ABC. And while I'm more partial to a more fanciful production that capitalizes on magic, spells, and a whole lot of pomp, gorgeousness, and beautiful, beautiful scenery, as well as a whole lot of mysticism that thoroughly combine all those magical, mystical, and fairy tale-like elements, which in turn define any traditional staging of Richard Strauss's Die Frau Ohne Schatten, I'm kind of willing to forgo all of those slight criticisms, let alone nitpicks I would have had about this production, and say that this is kind of an interesting direction, although the traditionalist in me would rather go for more awesome visual spectacles and maintain that fairy tale-like beauty that I've become so accustomed to in many traditional productions of the Frau Ohne Schatten. And now we get to the singers, but before I tackle the three main ladies of the nurse, the dyer's wife, and the empress, a few words about Stephanie Wake Edwards' superb performance as the voice from above, or in this particular production, the marriage/pregnancy counselor. Her chest tones were absolutely gorgeous, rich, round, and resonant. I have been admiring everything that this mezzo-soprano continues to offer in terms of her sheer vocal prowess being absolutely brilliant and thorough all the way through. And I salute Stephanie Wake Edwards for her awesome musicianship and thorough vocal prowess that have made her an absolutely amazing singing actress. Singing the nurse was Marina Prudenskaya, whose round, rich, voluminous, and creamy mezzo-soprano voice was still intact. There was no wobble, no throatiness, and no artificial darkening. It was a sufficiently round and beautiful tone that she maintained all throughout the registers, whether they be her chest tones or her head tones or her high notes. She definitely had it all. You could argue that she did lack in a lot more additional volume in certain areas, especially when she has to let her voice all out, complete with metal, steel, and a whole lot of precious stones supposedly falling out of her mouth. But I'm willing to forgive whatever tiny nitpicks were present with Marina Prudenskaya because she is still a technically proficient singing actress. You could also argue that there were also much bigger voice nurses of the past, such as Grace Hoffman, Ruth Hesse, Irene Dallas, Gisela Schröter, and Sigrid Kiel being some of my favorite interpreters of the nurse, but I thoroughly digress because Marina Prudenskaya's vocal assets in terms of her smoky timbre, her creamy tone, and her focused instrument were all intact from beginning to end. So I have to salute Marina Prudenskaya for such a grand job as the nurse. Catherine Foster continues to be thorough in the most positive and excellent way as the dyer's wife. Her creamy tone, which managed to grow in a lot more chestiness and even take advantage of those chest tones, continued to show a lot of consistency as well as charisma. And her top notes continued to be as gleaming, exciting, and absolutely brilliant as ever. In fact, Catherine Foster's top notes were her greatest assets of all time, to the point where she let them out with full abandon. And her chest tones were also just as grand. She definitely showed a lot of commitment at digging into those chest tones and making them round, rich, and cavernous as possible. Sure, I do miss a lot more size and a lot more dimension and way more excitement found in singers such as Christelle Goltz and Birgit Nilsson, being the complete packages of this role. And in terms of high notes that shatter glass, why not go with someone like Gwyneth Jones, or the whole package as well found in Hildegard Behrens, who I also argue was an excellent dyer's wife. Or if I wanted someone a lot more chesty, deeper, richer, rounder, and completely versatile, Christa Ludwig would be my main woman to sing the dyer's wife. However, in the case of Catherine Foster, I thoroughly digress because she showed consistency, she showed fine artistry, and her technical prowess continued to be as rock solid and strong as it's always been. It should be no surprise that her top notes were still there because she was once upon a time a former empress. So her experience with singing the empress and also singing the dyer's wife showed that she understands both women as well as their psyches and even used those top notes to her advantage. So another great brava to Catherine Foster for great consistency as well as amazing musicianship. Speaking of amazing musicianship, Daniela Köhler was just as phenomenal as the Empress. When listening to Frau Köhler as the Empress, she sounded like an amalgamation of Leonie Rizenek during her younger years in the 1950s and Gundula Janowitz because of that silvery tone and that youthful loveliness that sounded so crystalline and clear, especially when she hit those top notes. The reason why I say that Daniela Köhler kind of reminded me of Leonie Rizenek was because her top notes were absolutely gleaming. Her overall vocal presence was strong and sturdy, and most importantly, her theatrical flair was at an all-time high. But she's also quite akin to Gundula Janowitz in terms of that silvery crystalline voice, especially when she hits those top notes. And there's the youthfulness in Daniela Köhler's voice that has defined her as one of the finest jugendlich dramatische Soprane or spinto sopranos that I have been listening to. Her repertoire has been quite extensive and impressive, singing a lot of the Wagnerian spinto roles such as Helmwige from Die Walküre, Elsa from Lohengrin, Elisabeth from Tannhäuser, and Eva Pogner from the Meistersinger von Nürnberg, and even having a stab at Sieglinde from Die Walküre and Brünnhilde from Siegfried, thus demonstrating a great deal of versatility as well as a reliable technique that has been helping Daniela Köhler seal her fate in such a great positive way as one of the finest lyrico spinto sopranos I've ever listened to. I've even been following her career for quite some time and remained totally transfixed with everything she did, from the more lyrical roles to the more dramatic soprano roles. However, this is where I advise her to show a lot more caution and take a lot more care of whatever vocal beauty is still intact, because I would not want her to let her voice go way too all out with the more dramatic soprano roles of, let's say, Isolde or Brünnhilde. She is a lot more preferable in roles such as Elsa from Brabant, Elisabeth from Tannhäuser, Eva Pogner from the Meistersinger von Nürnberg, Helmwige from Die Walküre, and if I wanted to have it my way, a lot more Italianate roles such as Elisabetta di Valois from Don Carlo, Aida from Aida, and even Norma from Bellini's Norma. Those are roles that I would actually like to hear and see Daniela Köhler sing in a lot more, because she does have that crystalline, gleaming, translucent, and incandescent top that has made her absolutely brilliant, especially where her high C's, high D flats, and high D's are concerned. They were resonant and ringing throughout the theater, and I could feel the overall emotional impact that she offered when she hit those high notes with full-on confidence, full-on excitement, and full-on brilliance. That is just how much Daniela Köhler floored me over in the best possible way as the Empress. Therefore, I salute Daniela Köhler with all of my heart, mind, and soul because of her beautifully incandescent lyrico spinto voice that was exciting from beginning to end. And here's also hoping that she continues to demonstrate way more excitement, way more awesomeness, and of course maintain that core that has also powered her so beautifully as a singing actress. Nina Solodovnikova's full lyric colorature soprano voice was put to excellent service as the Red Falcon, as her voice soared above the orchestra so beautifully, complete with a rich, full tone as well as loads of beautiful musicianship. And Hye-Young Moon's gorgeous, agile, crystalline, and clear voice was also put to amazing use as the guardian of the threshold, in which this production she's playing a young mother-to-be guiding the Empress, which I thought her stage presence and her vocal presence were all in all absolutely phenomenal. Special kudos also has to go to Alexandra Omens, Ariana Manganello, Lilith Daftian, and Martina Baroni for also providing their voices to help out the voices of Hye-Young Moon and Stephanie Wake Edwards as both the servant girls and the children's voices. So brava to all of them. Patrick Getty's trademark basso profondo voice was put to absolutely outstanding use as Kaikobad's messenger. His tall presence was also one of his greatest assets, but more than anything, his round, cavernous, and earth-shattering basso profondo voice put in such a great level of an imposing quality to this messenger, and he also deserves his laurels and his gold medals and blue ribbons because of his excellent vocal portrayal. Jordan Shanahan was virile, rugged, round, and rich as Barak the Dyer. What I've always cherished about Jordan Shanahan is his rugged and absolutely virile, rich, cavernous, and thoroughly exciting, dramatic baritone voice that also has some low notes of a bass baritone thanks to using his core in the best possible way and also providing Barak with his virility, yet also a great deal of humanity. I've always admired Jordan Shanahan as a singing actor, and he is definitely one of the finest Helden baritones of today, all thanks to his superb technique and the way he was able to make his voice soar above that orchestra and just grab at my heartstrings every time he opened his mouth to sing. That is just how much of an exciting singing actor Jordan Shanahan truly was as Barak. So he deserves a lot of love, acclaim, and salutes from yours truly because of his artistic prowess and his overall technical skill as a rugged and richly toned Helden baritone with the nice, deep, cavernous low notes of a bass baritone. David Butt-Philip continues to be vocally exciting as the Emperor, all thanks to his spinto bordering on dramatic tenor voice, which has grown in richness, volume, and incision. His voice just flew around the theater like a huge pile of swords and darts just flying all over the battlefield to slice up some enemies and do so with a lot of ferocity, ferociousness, and lethal precision. That is just how much David Butt-Philip was thoroughly exciting as the Emperor. He is totally up there with the likes of James King as one of my favorite singers of the Emperor, unless I forget about Bernd Eidenhoff, who's also one of my favorite Helden tenors in this role. And David Butt-Philip really proved to himself that he was in a class of his own. He really let his voice out with such pure abandon and pure awesomeness that I was left totally astounded at his vocal prowess. Porrick Rowan's resonant, sturdy, and handsome one-armed man was absolutely fabulous all the way through. Philip Yeka's characterful and charming one-eyed man was a welcome treat, and Thomas Chalufo's absolutely gorgeous and thoroughly engaging Hunchback was wonderfully sung, all thanks to his trademark use of excellent bel canto singing. Chance-Jonas O'Toole was also charismatic and charming as the appearance or the apparition of a youth, all thanks to his trademark silvery, light lyrics / character tenor voice that had a lot of charisma and a whole lot of youth that made him stand out really well. I also have to salute the virile, sexy, and masculine baritone voices of Stephen Marsh, Kyle Miller, and Gion Kim for producing such juicy, sexy, virile, round, rich, and excellently covered tones as the Watchers or the guards of the city. And I also have to give a fair bit of kudos to Harald Heinz, who embodied the role of Kaikobad with dignity, as well as a bit of fatherly warmth and trying to ensure that his daughter tries to make the right decision. And also some kudos has to go to Björn Ole Blunk for his fine characterization as the doctor in the video. So overall, the singing was thoroughly excellent in their own special way from everybody. I definitely think that among the women, Daniela Köhler stood head and shoulders above the competition as such an incandescent, excellently toned, and thoroughly luminous and absolutely crystalline empress. Her voice had this youthful presence, but at the same time, a whole lot of endurance, confidence, chutzpah, and aplomb that made her thoroughly stand out exceptionally and so beautifully as a singing actress. She is totally up there with Leonie Rizanek as one of my favorite singers of the Empress, and here's also hoping that she continues to preserve her naturally beautiful, naturally piercing, and absolutely silvery lyrico spinto soprano voice to also ensure that she continues to make the right decisions with her repertoire. I also have to give major kudos to Catherine Foster and her absolutely mellifluous, charming, and creamy-toned Dyer's wife, and Marina Prudenskaya for doing such a fabulous job as the nurse. These three ladies definitely stole the show tonight and were also able to make such a strong impression on their respective characters, combining Daniela Köhler's silvery, piercing tones, Catherine Foster's creamy, dramatic soprano voice that made the Dyer's wife absolutely brilliant to listen to, and Marina Prudenskaya's dusky, smoky mezzo-soprano voice being a great complement to the two sopranos of the evening. These ladies were absolutely fabulous, and I salute each and every one of them. And I also love the male performers, especially where the likes of Patrick Getty, Jordan Shanahan, and David Butt-Phillip were concerned. These gentlemen were also just as brilliant, and they also carried the evening all the way through. And I dare not forget about the superb contributions done by Hye-Young Moon, Chance-Jonas O'Toole, Nina Solodovnikova, Stephanie Wake Edwards, Philip Yekal, Pork Rowan, Thomas Chalufo, Ariana Manganello, Alexander Omens, Lilith Daftian, Martina Baroni, Stephen Marsh, Kyle Miller, and Gayon Kim. Everybody did superbly, and they were able to bolster tonight's performance of the Frau Ohne Schatten. Axel Koba's conducting was thoroughly brilliant and thoroughly nuanced. He was not afraid to go big and exciting, but also find nuances with the score, thus making for such a thoroughly exciting evening of music. He knew how to conduct Strauss with nuance, excellence, and a great ear for detail, thus ensuring that the orchestra, the chorus, and the singers blended so magnificently. And what more can you expect from the chorus and the orchestra of the Deutsche Oper Berlin? They were all excellent all the way through. So with a more modern take of the Frau Ohne Schatten, veering away from the more magical fairy tale-like aspects of the original libretto and adapting it to a more modern setting, it was quite an interesting move. And even though I'm not necessarily a huge fan of this production, I still have to laud it for some interesting concepts. But the singing was absolutely fabulous. Patrick Getty, Jordan Shanahan, David Butt-Phillip, Stephanie Wake Edwards, Marina Prudenskaya, Catherine Foster, and Daniela Köhler were definitely the real deals tonight, all thanks to their astounding vocal prowesses and their overall flair for drama, overall flair for creating great music, and also a great deal of technical and thoroughly musical prowess that made them stand out so beautifully and handsomely and absolutely brilliantly. They all deserve A pluses all around for such an exciting evening of music and opera. And here's also hoping that they continue to deliver a lot more stirring and astounding performances. And for those of you who caught this production of the Frau Ohne Schatten by Strauss at the Deutsche Oper Berlin, what'd you think of it? Did you feel that Tobias Kratzer's production of this opera was quite interesting to look at? What was your most favorite moment in this production? Did you also feel that the singing was absolutely brilliant, whether it be the dark, cavernous, basso profondo voice of Patrick Getty, all the way up to the brilliant and silvery lirico spinto voice of Daniela Köhler as the Empress? Or did you feel like the singing and the production were not your cup of tea? Please let me know in the comments below. Well, that's it for my review of Strauss's Die Frau Ohne Schatten at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. Tune in next time for my review of Puccini's Turandot, also at the Deutsche Oper Berlin, starring Jorge Puerta as Calaf and Maria Motolegina as Liu. So until then, happy Valentine's Month, everybody!